This series that should take place over the next 13 lessons is what I call the beginning of everything. And it's on the study of Genesis 1 through 3. Um, and so the obvious question kind of comes, why spend a whole quarter on 3 chapters of Genesis 1 through 3? Why would we spend so much time just on these 3 chapters? And so before I tell you my reasons, I want you to hear your reasons. Why would you think maybe you would, or I was thinking that we would spend 13 lessons on these 3 chapters? It's the Yeah, it's the beginning. It's the start. Like everything else comes from this. Like so, it's very impactful. Yeah. What else? There's a lot to pull out of this section. There is a lot to pull out of these 3 chapters. A lot. Any other thoughts? Yeah, it's a lot of book of first, which is why I call it the beginning of everything, because everything kind of starts with that. It comes out of that, and it's a super dense, composed um, 3 chapters that really bring about a lot of key themes. You will see in these first few pages how the author prepares a lot of themes that we'll see over and over and over and over again the rest of um, the whole book. And really, it's also where we have the answers to the fundamental questions of life. And this is something that any religion, it's kind of one of the definitions for religion, is it has to offer some kind of answer to the fundamental questions of life. And what are those fundamental questions of life? What are the fundamental questions of life? Why am I here? What else? Who is God? Is there a God? Who put me here? What's my purpose? Why do bad things happen? Yeah, all of these. How do we get here? What's our purpose? Why do bad things happen? Where are we going? How did this world, did it where did it come from? Like with everything that this earth has, with its sustained nature and order, and the plants and animals, like that just didn't happen. Some people try to say that it did, but even they have to come up a convoluted process for how that happened. And so every people's, every culture, every nation and society that has ever lived has had to come up with an explanation for these answers, and to come up with answers for these questions. Um, why are we here? How do we get here? What is the purpose of life? All those things. And how do you think it's very it's good, it's important for us to be able to answer those questions in a reasonable manner? Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great place to start with people, as like it's a shared what we have as humanity. We all have this need for purpose, for why we are here. And so it's a great place to start with it. And in any version you kind of give to the purpose of life as why we're here, it starts in these 3 chapters. Its beginning point is there. I often say that almost anything begins in Genesis chapter 1 through 3 and is culminating in Jesus' death on the cross. Everything in the Bible is pointing back to the first 3 chapters of Genesis and culminating on the cross, and or the implications of that. And so it's really important to really understand these 3 chapters. And so what we're going to do in this class, it's going to be pretty simple in some ways. We're going to one purpose is to really nail down what these first 3 chapters say, what they're talking about, what the answers are from these first 3 chapters. Um, and then also, what are some themes that that start in these first three chapters that kind of carry on the rest of the Bible? And it's only going to be some of those themes. We can't explore all the themes; that would take a very long time. But I picked some of the ones that are most maybe fundamental to us to explore. And so this is kind of my, if you can look, it's a little small, but this is my outline for the sessions. We're doing the introduction in the beginning today, and it's going to kind of center around the first three chapters: Genesis 1, Genesis 2, Genesis 3. We will next week, and we may even try to get started getting into it this week because it will take some time. What does Genesis 1 say? We'll kind of go through the chapter, see what it says, and then we'll explore the waters of chaos and life, which is a really interesting theme that goes throughout the Bible, which culminates obviously in baptism. And so we'll kind of see that progression, and then there'll be various themes, the seventh day, and different ones. I will say that we'll have to do a little bit more heavy lifting towards the beginning to understand kind of what Genesis 1 and 3 is talking about, and then towards the end, we'll definitely get into some more application things, especially when it gets into temptation and exile and the fall, and being the priests for God and rulers for God, how we fit into that picture. So if you stay through the first couple of lessons, as we're kind of laying the groundwork, there will be a payoff, I believe, later. And so that's what we will be covering the next several um, sessions. Any questions so far? Any questions or comments so far? Yeah. 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 There's a lot that's in a very small amount of words. So that is where we're looking for, and I believe this is very important to us because almost every other religion will differ in some way towards what the Bible teaches, and a lot of our world actively teaches against understanding that God created the world, which is what Genesis says, and the reason for sin. And I believe if we can understand these things at the beginning point and carry them through the Bible and then to us today, I believe that we will have a really strong foundation for how to live. Okay. So what I want to first do today is kind of just explore what is a theme, and then I want to explore some introductory principles to look at when we look at Genesis 1 through 3. First, what is a biblical theme? I don't want to just throw around that word without everyone understanding exactly what I'm talking about, because it's going to be a key component as we go through this series. So in your own kind of definition, what is a biblical theme? Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a theme of justice, that there will be justice for men, and when you do something wrong, there's justice for that. Yeah, very, very good. Um, I'll put up the definition first, and then we'll get to some more examples. So biblical themes, and this is just my definition, so I didn't take this from anywhere, so it may be perfectly imperfect. The biblical themes are similar images, words, settings, or phrases that are repeated over and over again throughout the Bible. So, and I'll have some examples of this, but I wanted you to give me your examples. What are some examples of themes throughout the Bible? We heard about justice. What else? Redemption, both of you. What are a couple examples of that? Yeah, very good, very good. And in Christ, yep, good. What's another biblical theme? What was it? Sorry, what? A redemption. Yeah, Ruth is another example of redemption, and there's several throughout the whole book. That's why it's a theme. Yeah. Did you have another theme? Yeah. So Life according to the Bible. Yeah, life according to the Bible. Yeah, good. Love. That's a huge theme, like throughout the whole book. Good. Death. I mean, that starts right here in Genesis 3, where did death come from, and you'll see that cycle over and over again. Yeah, good. Blood of the Lamb, especially when we get to the Exodus, and we get into all those rules and laws, and then the Passover, and then Jesus, of course, emphasizes that. Yeah. So salvation through remnant, weakness, secondborn. Yeah. Some person that doesn't look like it, but he is bringing the salvation. You see that a lot in Judges. Good. Forgiveness. Yeah, that's an excellent one. Judgment. Yeah. So like a whole nation will be judged for what they do. You see that a lot in Israel. They, Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely good. Yeah. Oh yeah. The family. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Blessings and curses. Um, yeah, that kind of goes with a judgment. Yeah. But another. Yeah. They're always coming up short. And so maybe the flip side of that is God's grace. That is always it's God's grace and God's justice because of man's imperfection. And depending on if you follow God or don't follow God, depends on which one you get. But yeah, very good. So yeah, those are really good big themes. And those are some that you see over and over. They are common stories that you see. Most of them start in the book of Genesis, and you see them over and over again, all through the Old Testament and the history and the prophets, even some of the poetry, all the way, especially to Christ. He emphasizes many of these, and then on through the church, and then of course to today, we should be implementing some of those as well. And so we see those through the whole book. And most of what was said was characteristics, things like judgment and love and compassion and characteristics. But themes can be different things as well. And I just want to give a few examples of that, so we don't like limit themes just to that small thing. One is the example of direction. So the theme of direction in the Bible. So in Genesis 3, verse 24, after God cast out Adam and Eve from the garden, what direction does he cast out them? East. And then after God banishes Cain, what direction does Cain go? Give you a wild guess. East. Yeah, east. And then what direction do the people that built the tower in Genesis 11 of Babel go? East. Can you sense the theme of what's going on? What does it mean to go east? Just by those three. You're doing something wrong, and so you have to leave. Yeah, you're leaving. You're being exiled. Um, yeah, exit stage right. Exactly. Uh, I think there's like a song like "Go West, Young Man." I think there's a that kind of. I think he's picking up on this theme. But over and over throughout the Bible, we'll see people go east, and it should be, they'll throw it in, and sometimes it doesn't even really, it just seems to be thrown in. But they're doing that intentionally. So Jacob goes east when he leaves he has to flee from his brother. He goes east. It's like an exile. And so when he comes back west and he goes back to the homeland, that's a big thing. David is exiled to the east after he sinned with Bathsheba, and one of the punishment was his Absalom would come up and overthrow him. He is exiled, and it says he went to the east. And Israel is also exiled to the east. Several times throughout the prophets, it said that they would be exiled to the east. Babylon is, of course, to the east of them. And so the return always comes west, and it's this directional thing. And so Israelites, if they're picking up on it, they would be like, I know what's going on. This is a big theme throughout it. Another one is it can be numbers, and so I think we're pretty aware of this. So, what does the number 40 mean? What is usually associated with the number 40? There's fasting. Okay, so there's several. So Israel was so it rained for 40 days and 40 nights with Noah. Yeah, he was in the ark. Um, what was it? The Israel wandered for 40 years. 40 days? Yeah. Jesus was tempted for 40 days with Satan, and he fasted for 40 days. Um, Also, Moses was on the mountain for 40 days, and Israel, in the meantime, while he was up there, what did they do? They made a golden idol and and basically went away. Jonah said in 40 days, preaching to Nineveh, there will be a judgment, a testing. What 40 represents in the Bible in all those cases is a time of testing. It's 40 days, you're going to be tested. How will you fare? And some did really well. Noah did well. Even Nineveh, they did well. Jesus, of course, did well. Others failed, like Israel did when Moses was on the mountain. And they turned from God and they built a golden idol. So 40 represents testing. And so as you're reading along, you come to the number 40, you're like, oh, there's going to be a test here. Are they going to fail or are they going to succeed? I'll do one more. Example can also be setting. There could be different settings that happen. Just a really quick one. So Jonah is at Joppa when God comes to him and says, "Go to Nineveh, and tell him to repent." Basically, do you remember another story in which Joppa is prominent in the New Testament? I'm going to really test your Bible knowledge. Yeah, very prevalent. Maybe in Acts 10. Yeah, Peter, yeah. So Peter was at Joppa when the men came to him and the whole vision and that whole thing. Yeah, on the roof. And do you know Peter's full name? Simon Bar Jonah. So you have a Jonah who's at Joppa who God tells to go preach to Gentiles. Come on. Come on. Yeah. God knows what he's doing. And this is, of course, right after there's a bunch of persecution where the Jews are starting to reject Christianity, just like they were during Jonah's day. He's just replaying. And so when it says Peter was at Joppa, he knows what he's doing. He just does. And so he's doing all of this. This is all according to plan. And so, the question is, why do I need to understand these things? I can do perfectly fine and understand what I need to do for salvation, without knowing all of these themes and underlying. Why do I need to see all this stuff? I don't know if I got that. So why is it important to see these themes that play out? What would your answer be? If someone said, I have enough, I know salvation, why do I need to look and see all these themes or try to find these themes throughout the Bible? Yeah. 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 So especially when it comes to characteristics, these are the principles and things that we all have to deal with: justice and love and forgiveness, and there's stuff that all humanity is. So even though this took place thousands of years ago, it's still relevant for us today because there's these themes that continue. So yes, very good. What else? Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. Very good. you just get so much depth to it. And I have the example, like, it's like listening to Bach or Mozart. Like there's a certain amount of appreciation. I don't know if anyone's like really good at music in here. I am not. I am not at all. So like, but there's a certain level in which I can appreciate Bach and Mozart just on a pure. I can hear it. It sounds good. It's really great. But how much more will somebody appreciate it who actually knows music theory and understands the genius that they're employing? And then, like maybe a different example is okay, whatever sport you're into or whatever thing you're into. Would you rather watch that football game in like a 20-inch box TV, black and white, with fuzzies going all over it, like was our first TV, and you have to like hold just right to get any clear picture? Is that how you want to watch that football, or do you want like a QLD 80-inch plasma flat screen TV to watch that football game on? And you can basically, in both pictures, you can basically tell what's going on. You can taste the general, but you get so much depth and life, and you can appreciate what's going on better, and you can see the details and things you never known before, and it piques your interest more having that bigger picture and that coloration, as you said. And so that's like reading the Bible. Yes, you can understand the basic things without really a whole lot of Bible study. I mean, you can read the gospel and Acts, and you can get the basic, I'm a sinner, Christ died for me, I need to be baptized, and go to heaven. That doesn't take very long to get. But don't you want to read it and like get the full color picture? And then as you develop that and learn it, how much more does that make you fall in love with God and what he's done for you and all these things, and amazed at the mind of Christ, and like it just brings so much more passion to what you're doing. Charles? Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, very, very much so. Tim? Yeah, 100%. And like, there's a certain understanding that we can say, okay, we can read in Acts, God said do this, okay, we should do it. 100%. But how much more could you teach someone if you understand the reason God said to do it? And that's what some of this is, especially with like baptism, which we'll get to. There's a reason God, he wasn't just like, I like dunking people underwater. Like that's not what it's all about. Like there's a reason God made that as an image for us giving our life to Christ. And of course the whole burial and resurrection and things. But how much more can we explain that to people, especially who have no Christian background, who thinks it's just a nutty thing that cult people do, and show that that it actually has reason behind it, and that helps our faith and the things that we do. Yeah, 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 yeah. Very good, very good. Any thoughts? And the final thing I would say is like if God took the time and these authors took the time to put these in here, shouldn't we take the time to at least try to find these and look at them? Maybe they're important enough. If he thought they were important enough to put in there, maybe they're important enough to look for. Um, and so I would just say that too. These don't just happen. These are these are put in there specifically for our purpose, so we can track these journal themes throughout the Bible and into our lives. Any questions? Okay, so that's themes. Okay, so as we look into kind of an introduction of Genesis 1 through 3, as we prepare for this, um, but as we go into each section, we'll have one class in which we just kind of sit down and look at that chapter, and we just kind of look and see what it says. And then we'll kind of go back in subsequent lessons and kind of explore and fish out some particular details. But just as we go and study these first 3 chapters of Genesis, what are some things that would be good to have in the back of our minds as we read Genesis 1 through 3? Or if somebody was like, hey, I'm thinking about reading Genesis, what are some things that you would tell them to have in the back of their mind as some context as they read these, specifically Genesis, but especially those first 3 chapters? Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. And God is the creator of life. It comes from God. And it's precious. It's a precious thing. Good. What else? Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So as we read this, maybe we should be thinking about those questions in the back of our mind. Okay. How do we get here? What is our purpose? And it really it starts there, but throughout Genesis, it even kind of biggers that picture of the human condition and all those kinds of things. Yeah, very good, Bob. Yeah, God was very intentional. So as we look at Genesis, we can think God was very intentional in how He did things. Yeah, important sequence. Yeah, 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 yeah. Very much so. And there's the things that tripped up man since the beginning, and it's common to all man. Yeah, very good. Susan? Yeah, we should read the beginning of the story. Many people like to jump to the middle, which is we call the New Testament. It helps to have a full picture of why the New Testament is needed if we start with the beginning of the story. So yeah, yeah, very good. Anything else? Um, who is Genesis 1 through 3 written to? Okay, so it's written um, to everyone. Is that true? It's written for everyone. It's not written to everyone. Yeah, that's a key difference. That's a very key difference. Who was Genesis originally written to? Israel, and some kind of ancient Israel. So most people think it's um, Moses is the author. We don't know that for sure, but it's probably written sometime around the early part of Israel's, after they've exited uh, Egypt and they've become a nation and they went into the promised land. Sometime around there is when um, the whole Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, is created. And so it's written to ancient Israel. Now it's written for all of us. And why is it important to make that distinction that it's not written to us, but for us? What happens if you think this is written to us? Yeah. So we can I think there's a couple of things. So we can misinterpret it to try to apply it to us today when it's not really what it is saying whatsoever or understand the background. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, yeah. And so God is writing this to them and talking to them, to this group of people who's coming out of paganism. He's coming out of that world, whose neighbors were the Egyptians, the Canaanites, the Mesopotamian people, Samaritans. Those were the context. That was the world in which they lived in, where there was gods, and we'll kind of touch on this briefly, hopefully at the end of the night, that had their own creation stories. They had their own kind of starts, and they had their own kind of systems and religions and answers to those questions that we talked about. Why are you here? What is your purpose? All of that. And so this is the context in which God is presenting this book to him. And I think it's really important to understand this because just as communication goes, communication has to be to a people. Communication is, excuse me, communication is a agreed upon um, words and phrases in which one party can communicate certain ideas through those words to another. Um, and so if God is not speaking to 21st century Americans in Genesis 1 through 3, that's not who he's speaking to. Now, he's speaking for everyone. Make that clear. He's making it for us, but he's not speaking to us. And so if we take our own ideas and our own notions, and we take those and we come into Genesis 1 through 3, and we think this is speaking to us, we'll make critical errors, really bad errors, and we'll misinterpret what God was saying to these ancient Israelites. And so we got to understand that. And this kind of goes back to what we talked about, I think, last year, how you read your Bible. You first kind of just see what's there, get an overview, and then you have to interpret it. Okay, what was God saying to the original readers? And then once you have a good idea of that, then we have application for us today. We can make appropriate leap of application. Otherwise, if you skip that step of interpretation, you'll make massive errors. 100%. Yeah. This applies to everything, not just here, but this is where we're studying. But yes, that's a very important thing to say. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It'd be kind of weird starting with Exodus and be like, we're here. But yeah, very nice. And so he's writing to these ancient Israelites, and they have different preconceptions of what the world is. They have different science of how they think the world works. Does God care to change their view of science? No, that is the answer. No. There's several times that he will talk about, and we kind of just take this for it, but he talks about you thinking with your heart, but you don't think with your heart. That ancient people thought thought with your heart. God doesn't care about changing the science. We know we think with our brains. That's where our thinking is. They thought the emotions were in the bowels of the stomach because that's where you get all the emotions when stuff goes. That's how they talked. That's where they thought everything was. We know that's not the case. But God used what they thought of the world and how they understood the world and communicated the principles and ideas that he wanted them to understand through the way they thought. And that's perfectly okay. Like, that's okay. He was communicating to those people through their normal means. And what it means is we don't care about the same things that they cared about. What kinds of things would we want to know about creation? So if I said you get 15 minutes with God, you can ask him any question you want about creation, what would you ask? Yeah, were dinosaurs real? Yeah. So maybe specific animals that he created. Yeah. Okay. Were are dinosaurs real? Yeah. No questions? Just going to be like silent? Okay, where you come from? Okay, yeah. I think a big one is when. Like, can you give me a starting date? Because that's a big discussion nowadays. Okay, was it 2 billion years ago, 10 million years ago? Was it 15,000, 20,000 years ago? Was it 8,000 years ago? That's a huge discussion nowadays. Like, yeah. Any others? Yeah, yeah, yeah. How many sustainable life systems did you create in the universe? Yeah, and where are they? And also, can you provide a way for us to? Yeah, yeah. Uh, like, and maybe another thing is how. We're told how a little bit. God through His breath, and we'll get into that. That's going to be a whole section. But we're not told like, okay, intimately. How He designed every animal, every tree. How He did. Was it just a and it just all came out, or was there more to that? Or we're not told exactly the details of how. We're given a kind of blanket statement. I think those are some of the things that we would think about. Genesis doesn't really answer those questions necessarily. We're never given a start date time. They've been nice to solve a lot of our debates, but we're not. He doesn't care about that. We just says in the beginning. That's the time reference. So in the beginning of human life, this is this is when this took place. And it doesn't really talk about how because it says through the breath, through His Spirit, but we're not actually told exactly the details of how everything's made. They what Genesis 1 through 3 more talks about and emphasizes is who and why. Who made it and why did He make it? Yeah, and what? I guess what? What did? Yeah. What did He make and why did He make that? And that's a huge thing to understand. Who made it? God made it, and it shows His power, especially compared to some of the other religions of the day. What did He make? He made everything that we see here. He made the whole system that we call Earth, and He made everything that lives and breathes on this earth. And why did He make it? And that will be some of the things we talk about later that I think often are overlooked. As priests and rulers and as His temple and all those things that we're going to talk about later. Because that's the thing I think we often miss from this section. And we kind of already talked about the context of ancient Israelites. They're coming out of Egypt. They're surrounded by all of this. They've been indoctrinated. So if you think about the Israelites, they've been in Egypt for how long? Kind of depends who you talk to, how long, but hundreds of years. So it's either 400 plus years or 200 plus years, depending on which commentator you talk about. But it's been hundreds of years since they've. I mean, you think about that. If you take the short 250 years, that's longer than America has been a nation. And so you think about them in Egypt being indoctrinated by Egyptian religion for that long. I mean, they've forgotten most of everything except for maybe the very little that was passed down through generations. They were a pagan people. That's what God says. They were not a great person. Jeremiah says, it wasn't because of the goodness of your hearts that I saved you. It was out of my goodness and my love for you. And God has to re-educate them and make them the people that He makes them today. This is a quote from William Brown. The framers of the creation and the Bible inherited a treasure trove of mineral ideas and traditions from their cultural neighborhoods. Means a lot of different types of traditions from their neighbors. So the Egyptians, the Samaritans, the Canaanites, all of them. And instead of creating their accounts ex nihilo, that means out of nothing, so in creating their accounts out of thin air, the composers of the scriptures developed their traditions in dialogue with some of the greatest religions and traditions of the surrounding cultures, particularly those originating from Mesopotamia and Egypt, as well as those in their more immediate Canaanite neighbors. Means they didn't make a story that was completely new, that was nothing the Israelites would have ever heard of. The stories of creation are very much, that we have here, are very similar to those of Mesopotamia, of the Canaanites, and of Egypt. They would have been familiar with some of the ideas and the concepts. We don't really have time to look at all of them, but there is some definitely things that are similar, but there are very key differences. And those differences are, I think, what God really wanted to emphasize to Israel. So if you look at the Egyptian god Atum, he self-creates himself out of chaotic waters, something that the chaotic waters is similar both. Like Genesis 1 through 11, whenever Egyptian gods overcome evil and chaos, they crush the heads of the serpents. That's all Egyptian religion. However, a notable difference between these two worldviews is that the Egyptian creator is not an uncreated, eternal, pre-existent being like Yahweh. Atum had to create himself from this chaotic waters. And Atum is the first self-caused cause, which is a form of pantheism. So instead of being this being that's always been around, that has ultimate power, it's very similar to like the Big Bang Theory for today. Is that there was this one God that out of all this energy, this chaos water, it self-formed. And that one being then helped self-form everyone else and create everything else. And that's a notable difference. Yes, real quick. So the truth obviously came first because that was the truth. That was how it happened. But there were other religions around before this was created. The Bible. Because the Bible, no book in the Bible was created. Repeat the question. God did not reveal, so Genesis was revealed to Moses around 1200 to 1400 BC. Yeah. Yes, 100% that it came from God. So I don't think that's actually a necessary conclusion, and this is why. So I believe that there is a true account of what happens, and this is the true account of what actually happened. I believe that other cultures diverged and made their own religions from what actually happened, and that's why you have similar things like the Noah flood story, something similar to it in many cultures throughout the world. But what we have here wasn't created. We have other manuscripts from ancient religions that predate before Genesis was actually written. And so what I would say happened is God was re-revealing to the Israelites what actually took place in history. And what he was doing is he is taking away the errors that the other religions, kind of put into what actually happened in history. And what he's doing is emphasizing certain truths about himself through that through his word. Does that kind of make sense? I don't want to lead anyone astray. Yes. Yes, that's a better, simpler way of saying it. Yes. Yeah, and it is the original history. Um, I guess the one thing I would say is that I don't believe other cultures saw the Bible and stole from the Bible. I don't think that's exactly how it came about. But yes, yeah, or stole from the original. Yeah, and I believe that is the true thing. Real quickly, I would say for these other ones, in their creation history and how they created the Samaritan, the Babylonian, the Canaanite gods, each one to create the world, to create humanity, they had to go through an intense fight. And they either had to defeat the Leviathan, a serpent. A lot of these had to defeat serpents, also going back to Genesis 3. They had the way the world was formed was from a situation of bloodshed and war, which is totally different from the account that we're given in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, those creation stories. It shows that God is unrivaled. He doesn't have to defeat anyone. This account, the true account, shows to the Israelites that he doesn't have to fight. The world was not brought forth in this fighting and this chaos. It demonstrates God more as an artist, that he just breathes and he designs and he makes everything that we see happen. He just speaks things into existence like a king does, and he's very much pictured as a king of the earth. And what he is full of goodness and life. And it's totally different from a lot of these other religions and these other people around, where like several of the Samaritan gods, they have whole stories of how humans came about. And it was because the lower gods got tired of serving the upper gods, and so they made humans. And then they were so stinky and they reproduced so much that they got tired of them, and so they decided to wipe them out, and so that was the flood. Like, if that's your perception of who God is and why you're created, that is totally different from what actually happened and what God was trying to get across to the Israelites. God specifically made mankind, and he specifically made them with a purpose, and we'll get to that later. But thank you for your comments and questions.